So why do I think we should sit back and look at Skies of Arcadia? Well, in order to get to sort of the kernel of that, I need to talk about a couple of things. One was something that I sort of talked about in passing on social media recently, and it was this notion that in the critical sphere, I think there is sometimes a desire to equate significance or importance with quality or quote-unquote, like, goodness, right? Like, how good a game is. And so there's a lot of problems with that, the least of which that something being significant or good are highly subjective terms. So I need to sort of qualify what I mean a little bit. When I talk about a game that is important or something like that, oh my gosh, my controller's going crazy. When I talk about a game that's significant or important, I mean one that sort of has us... Oh, controller, stop it. I don't know why it did that. So when I say significant or important, I need to make it clear that I'm talking about a game that either challenges our understanding of the form of video games, uses that form in an interesting way, or the narrative has certain things to say in terms of gender or politics or meta-narrative. And man, my controller is going to go crazy throughout this whole section. So let's give an example. One of my favorite games of all time is Skies of Arcadia, but one of my favorite quote-unquote important games of all time is Metal Gear Solid 2. It's actually what I think is one of the best games ever made. And best and favorite are different things, for the record. But why do we sit back and say that Metal Gear Solid 2 is interesting? Well, it's interesting and important because of the things it does in terms of reshaping and revising the form of Metal Gear Solid 1, and using that to comment on multiple things, including the player's relationship with their avatar, including the nature of video game sequels, including the nature of video games as interactive media. That's a game that has a lot to say, and so therefore we ascribe a certain degree of significance or importance to it, and then on a critical level we say that, well, that's a good game, right? That's true. I think that I think it's a good game. I think it's a great game, in fact. But I think that if our metric for understanding what makes a game great or good is whether or not it is critically interesting, I think that's a mistake. I think it's a very dangerous mistake for us to make, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is that it will fundamentally lock us out from a large majority of the canon of video games. So a lot of video games are not particularly significant when it comes to talking about the form or doing a lot of social commentary or anything like that. I just recently played on my Intellivision, which I love talking about because I love playing my Intellivision games. I played Frogbog. All you do is jump around as a frog and eat flies. Now, if we want to talk about a game that's good, I think Frogbog is good. I think it's fun. Not that fun is necessarily the metric for what makes something good, but I think I enjoy playing Frogbog. When I want to look at a game that is sort of that era, in our minds at least, but is also important, I can look at something like Missile Command. Missile Command is an important game because of sort of what it's doing with its gameplay and how you can never win and how it's about impending nuclear doom, blah, 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 blah. But if I sat back and had to say, like, oh no, the only past game of that era that's, like, important is, like, Missile Command, and then, you know, Adventure, and all these things, and I only name-drop the things that were sort of given with posterity the stamp of significance, I rob myself of experiencing a ton of games. And if we want to look at games critically, and if we want to look at games in any way that is not perfunctory, I think it is important for us to consider the wider catalog of games. So if I want to talk about JRPGs, yeah, I'm going to play Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, I'm going to play, you know, maybe Persona 4 or something like that. I'm going to play games that have a lot of things in them to sort of digest, but I'm also going to play something like Lunar. Which is not a complicated game. and almost has the same sort of purity and idealism that Skies of Arcadia does. Lunar is not necessarily a significant or important game. I think Lunar is still a very good game. So, first problem of equating significance or importance with good is that it locks us out of the wider canon of video games. The second issue is that significant and good, as we've sort of hinted at, are not necessarily equivalent terms. So, an example of a significant game that I do not think is good, if you can't see this one coming from a mile away, is Bioshock. Bioshock is a very significant game for a lot of different reasons. Do I think it is a good game? I don't. Other people might. Good is experiential, largely. I think that it failed on many levels in its commentary. Another example of a game that, like, if we wanted to say that commentary or self-awareness is a quality for something to be good, would be something like Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3 is a goddamn mess. And I can't sit back and say that Far Cry 3 is more important than, say, Far Cry 4, just simply because Far Cry 3 is trying to do something on a meta-text level. So good is not this thing that is equated with critically interesting, or necessarily even with game interesting or compelling on a gameplay level. So here's the last example that I'll give before abandoning this point. Let's talk about a game that is neither significant nor important, and not necessarily fun to play, or good from a mechanic standpoint, and that game is Deadly Premonition. Deadly Premonition is not an important game. I don't think we'll be looking back at Deadly Premonition in many significant critical ways, unless we want to look at it as an example when we look at auteur theory, and we consider, like, Swery as an auteur. Deadly Premonition has a plot that's incredibly insane, puzzles that are totally asinine, it controls like crap, kinesthetically it is really painful, graphically it is fairly ugly. Not that graphics matters all that much in the consideration of critical things, but it's a game that's generally a mess. It had a spectrum of review scores, and again, fuck review scores, we don't like those, but, it ranged from a 1 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 for people. So clearly there's something going on with that game that speaks beyond just the text, that speaks just beyond the gameplay. There's something else going on there that is more experiential, that is making it a game that people like. I fucking love Deadly Premonition. I would never sit back and tell you that it is a significant or necessarily, like, really tightly made game. I think it's made with a lot of passion. I think Swery is a goddamn genius, but I need to qualify that by also saying that the game is a total mess. Alright, so when we equate good, significant with good, we run into the problem of limiting our catalog of games that we experience. We also run into the potential pitfall of being critically snobbish and saying that, like, well, this game is important and did this for the form, and that one's not as important because it's far too trite, right? And that's a fucking mistake. We have to remember the reason why most of us got into games. And the reason why most of us got into games is because we played games and we enjoyed ourselves. When I first played Mario, I didn't sit back and go, oh my gosh, the game is teaching me that I have to either jump on or over the Goomba within the first 4 seconds or so, like, because the only way I can progress in Mario is to jump over the Goomba or to jump on it, and then also the blocks are there, so when I jump over the Goomba, I hit the blocks and potentially hit one of the things where I can get coins. Like, the game is doing, within like the first 5 seconds of Super Mario Brothers, it's doing a lot of good design stuff. But when I'm a kid, I'm not sitting back and saying like, oh my gosh, Super Mario is doing all this crazy design stuff. I'm saying Super Mario is fucking fun. Super Mario is an experience that I enjoy. So we should never, as critics or as people who want to take games seriously as an art form, forget the fact that part of the thing that we love about these games is that they enrapture us so much. And they don't need to enrapture us necessarily on a deep intellectual level, they can enrapture us on a gut level. I'm gonna go on with my second point, or like my fourth point here, and then we'll stop and we'll actually play the fucking game. Why do I think Skies of Arcadia is important? I think Skies of Arcadia is important because it makes me believe that people can be good. And that sounds like the most trite, stupid, emotional thing in the world. But the world is not a fair place. The world is messy and sort of shitty. So when I play a game like Skies of Arcadia, when I have a game that's so full of optimism, when I have protagonists that are bold, and who in the face of danger and disappointment and trials and tribulations retain their fundamental goodness, and when I have a game that affirms that people can be good to such a great degree, that's what makes this game important and significant to me. Sure, it's fun as hell to play, sure the setting is awesome and the graphics are really colorful and great, but the reason that Skies of Arcadia matters is because stories matter. And not just stories in games, stories in general. Games, the culture surrounding games, if you are unaware and have been living in a hole for a while, the culture has been great to a lot of people lately. Myself included, a lot of my peers included, plenty of developers who I've never met included, plenty of other people who are just trying to speak up against bad folk included. You all know what I am talking about. Games are important because even when that stupid cultural bullshit and toxicity is surrounding games, games can still be pure, and games can still remind us that there's good. It's the reason why we watch superhero movies. It's the reason why we play a game about sky pirates fighting the evil empire. It's the reason why Star Wars is so powerful. Stories reaffirm powerful things about the human condition, and they do it in a way that makes us believe in like miracles and all this great stuff again. So when I play Skies of Arcadia, and when I sit back and say that Skies of Arcadia is a game that we need to look at, we need to look at it as a story, not just as like a text and like, oh, what the dialogue is, but what the entire experience of Skies of Arcadia is as a game. And that and the emotions that it confers to the player. And it might not be doing that through intense experimentation with the form. It might not be doing that with amazingly smart narrative sort of tricks or anything like that. It might not be doing it with sort of really strange metatextual stuff. It's doing it just on a pure game level where I'm just playing a game, and when I play this game, I believe in heroes again. And so if you want to know why I think Skies of Arcadia is important, that is why Skies of Arcadia is fucking important. And that is why we shouldn't sit back and fall into the mistake of thinking that a game needs to be critically dense in order for it to be powerful or moving or worth our examination. So if you've stuck with me through that, thank you very, very much. I hope somehow I articulated my point to you. We're going to go on and play the game now.